Hey, it's me, Marv. I'm back with another video, but before I begin, I wanted to take the time to say thank you for all the support the channel's been getting. We're already just hitting 400 subs. My goal is to hit 500 before the end of the year. I am just so blown away about how much support the channel's been getting. So thank you again for interacting with the channel, subbing for the channel. It really means a lot. So let's see if we can get to 500 before the end of the year. But that's really about it I got to say for this opening of this video, just saying thank you. But let's begin. I wanted to show you guys how I was able to take one of my illustrations and actually put it to a real world application. I know a lot of times we might do drawings and illustrations and, incorporate them into comic books, cartoons, or just for posters or stickers. But I wanted to challenge myself and actually take that and incorporate a design element, maybe for a package design. In a sense, I came up with the idea of doing it for a craft beer label. What I'm about to show you is how I started and how I worked my way through it. And then later on, I'll just show you guys how I mocked it up and give you my resources too in the links below, all right? This right here is my step one. Step one is to get your idea out there. My idea was to do a pumpkin flavor, pumpkin theme craft beer. Since, we're coming up to the pumpkin season and it's going to be fall pretty soon, I thought it'd be a fun way to incorporate like a pumpkin skull for that seasonal drink. And with this pumpkin skull, I kind of wanted to add a little flair of the Headless Horseman, hence is why I kind of drew this jacket right here and kind of given my idea that it's a Headless Horseman pumpkin skull. Even early on, I even had planning for a copy. I left this side and also the top for copy, branding, logos. I wasn't too sure what that information was going to be at this point, but I knew that I needed to leave room for that and make my attention dead center. And then I also wanted to maybe incorporate a graveyard in the background and maybe a moon and some stars, just to have some kind of a background so it's not just a figure on a label. And this size is actually 8.25 by 5.25, and it's actually a label for a 16-ounce can. So this is step one of how I was going to start working on my illustration for the beer label. Now from this stage, I take it to like this weird in-between stage, and that is the refinement, I call it, or a cleanup. I'm basically taking my illustration and trying to tighten it up a little bit more, trying to add more definition in the skull and also the pumpkin. And as you can see, I only worked half of the skull because I knew I could just copy that and paste it on this side, tweak it on this side a little bit, so that way it's not a 100% copy of the left and right. Also allows me to work a little bit more quicker, so that way I can get to the under drawing stage a little bit more faster. But as you can see, this is just me cleaning it up and adding more definition into the skull and also into the pumpkin. Now from that, I'm able to make this. This right here is what I call my really tight under drawing, a really tight sketch. This is basically making a map of what I want to do when I get to the finished piece, when I start working on it. So that way I'm not going into it all confused or I'm making it up as I go along. I actually have a plan and I actually have an illustration to follow when I start working on that final piece. And it's key to realize that at this final stage, I start grouping everything together. My pumpkin character is on his own layer. And if you open up that group, you can see all the layers that make up that character, like the pumpkin's color. You can see the glow effects in here too. But I make sure that all this content that refers to my pumpkin character is grouped together. So that way I can move them around, resize it. And then the background, again, is on its own layer and also has its own assets. The moon, which is an element that I didn't bring over. I just kind of left it die here. I thought it was kind of competing. I'm keeping everything grouped together. And then you could see on this pumpkin character, I started adding some of the glowing effects, thinking that there's a candle in his skull and it's glowing through. And maybe it might bounce off the jacket. Also added this cool little carving. And then I'm also seeing what I want to do, what I want to try out on the stage too. As you can see, I added this neat little stitch, and I was thinking about having some stitches or some thread holding the pumpkin skull together, but I eventually decided not to do that and didn't carry that over. So that's just some of the ideas that you'll see, and when I start doing a really tight sketch, that I start like experimenting on what I want to do. And another thing I like to call out is that in the background, even though it's kind of far back there and it's kind of blurred and it's not really, it doesn't have a lot of detail, but it's implied that it's a graveyard. This is key for composition, and that is the fog kind of sits a little below And you just see in my final piece, I actually try to get the fog to sit lower because I did not want that fog to compete with the eye level of the skull's glowing eyes. That would just kind of lose that impact that this gives you already. I want this to really pop, so kind of want this to sit a little lower and a little bit more muted. So you'll see when I take this to finish and how I make those adjustments. That is something to keep your eyes out from when you're doing a background to make sure it doesn't compete with your main focus in the foreground. Now from this tight illustration, now we're ready to start inking it and actually start moving forward with the final piece. Now that I'm going to hit my layer cap on this file, I don't want to flatten anything because I want to keep it as a point of reference. So that way I know how to remake some of these effects and how I did some of the glows and whatnot too. So I always try to keep this file separate from my final file. So I'll always have a underdrawing file and then I'll always have a final working file, which I'm going to show you guys next. That is this file right here. Now this file, when I brought everything over, I literally just grouped everything together and I had it on a low opacity. Starting off with my pumpkin character. Then I did the line work. I start inking it. And I'm still using that guideline to make sure I'm still somewhat centered of the bottle or the label. I'm sorry, for the label of the can. Now from this, I still keep everything separate and organized and also keep your layers labeled too. So I have this one called Pumpkin. When you click on it, and in this, I got the glow that's broken out on its own. I got the line work that's right there. I have everything for the head that comes up too. Anything for the teeth, that's right there. Anything for the shirt or the scarf, that's right there on its own layer. And then the jacket is once again on its own layer. This is key to keeping everything nice and organized. I need to keep this separate because I don't know how large I wanted this to be at the end of the project. So keeping it on its own layer allows me to adjust the sizing when I take it into InDesign next. You can also see that I have a raw background and then I have a background final. And that is because my raw background is just me messing with color palettes, see what I want it to do for that background. I want it to be more blue. I want it to be more purple. I wanted something to be more like this. That way it really makes the glow of the eyes pop and really makes that pumpkin pop out from the background. And like I said before, you can see how I got that fog in the background to be a lot lower than I want it for the glow of the eyes. And it's a little bit more muted in the background too. Another thing you can't tell is that I also went ahead and blurred the background, kind of made it out of focus ever so slightly. And I did that by just doing the Gaussian blur and just kind of slowly moving it over. And another reason why I would have two background layers, so that way I can edit a flat version of it. And if I mess up, I can go back to my raw version of it. Now, this is the end of the stage of the illustration part of it. This is what it would look like. I'm going ahead and I drew out my template, what I thought a template would be like. I would have my name coming across the top of the label, maybe a logo in the middle, the name of the flavor right here. And then on both sides, I left room for having, text and copy, maybe a barcode on one of the two sizes. But I wasn't sure. But this was originally my first crack at a label design for this pumpkin craft beer. Now I'm going to take you guys over to InDesign and I'm going to show you how I start laying this out and actually how I started to make it more of a design piece and less of an illustration piece. Okay, so before I open up InDesign, I need to show you guys my file structure because as you saw before in Procreate, I show you my file structure, show how efficient it is to keep your files organized and keeping your layers organized too. I do the same thing when it comes to my files too. As you can see, I have a file called beer label. I keep calling it bear. I don't know why I want to say bear. Bear label. But my beer label has my logo, the label draft. I actually started building it in Illustrator because I was making the logo in Illustrator. Then I have an old folder just because I wanted to look up old designs that I was working on, or this is just stuff where I was messing around and I didn't like it. I kind of just killed it. But I always like to keep that just in case as a reference to see where I started and how I ended up at. And then I keep my file for the folder for the whole label in this folder right here. And in this folder, you have your InDesign file. This means right here, I have it open. I have a PNG, and I also have a JPEG, and I have a PDF. And then I have my links, which has my background. and my character drawing, and then also my tag. Now, I need to keep these layers separate so that way I can move them around freely in InDesign. And two, keeping everything in one folder allows me to package this folder and send it off to the printer, send it off to another designer, send it off to anyone who needs access to this project. And then I also keep the fonts in there too, so that way if they don't have that font, they'll have it when they get this folder. Now, before I move it to InDesign, I'm going to open up Illustrator and I'll show you this logo. I made this logo real quick. I started off as a illustration or a quick little drawing in Procreate. Wow. I drew this in Procreate. Then I just dumped it in Illustrator, roughed it out real quick. Then I went ahead and did a quick little typography with it just to see how it would look. You can see all my ideas that I was running around over here. Maybe it'll be in a circle, maybe it was like a half circle, but I eventually landed on this because I thought this fit nicely on a can, especially having this as like a centerpiece and it wrapping. Now, that's just extra stuff on making a quick little logo. Maybe I'll make another video about how I make logos, but for right now, I just wanted to show you my whole process at every stage for every little part of this too. Now, this is the InDesign file. In the InDesign file, I only have two layers. I have a label template, which is everything that's probably not going to change as much as the artwork. You know, you might have a name right here that might change. The artist might change. And even the color probably will change from label to label. But generally, everything here is going to probably be the same. The second layer is the artwork layer. Everything on the artwork layer is my X pattern. Essentially, everything here is going to change per flavor, per artist, per whatever the company wants to do. This layer is going to change. And that's why I have the text on this layer too. See head, it's right there, it's right there, and a pumpkin. And then I also have the background on its own layer. And then I have this black little rectangle going across the bottom. So that way my illustration can kind of come forward and pop a little bit more with that. And also it gives me a reason to have this black space down here at the bottom of the can to have any like legal stuff, mumbo jumbo stuff, you know, whatever fine print details that no one reads in the can, that could probably go here. Or if I couldn't fit it here, I could just drop it down there. You know, like that's why I dropped the please recycle down there in that bar. So yeah, that's this file, and this is like a print ready file essentially. And then if I hit W, you'll see I have a 9 grid going across. That's just because I like to work on odd numbers when I work on grids, and my center grid is typically my dead center of piece or the artwork that I'm working on. So that's kind of how I like to work. And then you can see on the template layer, I have all of the text that I was going to lay out and what I was planning on doing. I even got a fake fake barcode. Wow. A fake barcode to lay this in to see how it was going to fit and make sure I was good for clearance. And on this side too, you can see me typing stuff out. You can see me breaking apart the logo. But yeah, this is essentially my file that I was sent to press. I might make some adjustments to it if I needed to for the printer or some edits, but that's really about it for this file. And this is the same file that I'm going to take and put it in my Photoshop mockup when I make my beer can. So I will do that next. But before I get there, I want to show you guys how I set this file up. So when we have a new file, I want to hit inches. I want my file size to be 8 inches wide, 5 inches tall. I guess that I have it set for 9 columns. At the gutter at 1.25 or 0.125. And then my margins are the same, 0.125. And the same thing with my bleed, which is 0.125. This 0.125 will actually make your artwork, like I said earlier, was going to be 8.25. Well, when you add these numbers together, you actually make this 8.25 and 5.25. Hence is why you should do your artwork at that size, so that way you're going to have a bleed. And then you just hit create, and you can see I have it going. Last thing I probably forgot to tell you that you probably should do is probably name your file before you start it, just so you don't have untitled. That's just a good practice to get into, but it doesn't hurt you if you don't do it right away. But it's just a good habit to, keep moving forward. All right, now let me get into Photoshop, and I'll show you what I do next in Photoshop with this file right here. Okay, so before we begin, I have to address this. I messed up. What I did, I don't know if you guys noticed, but this looks a lot more clearer. I completely forgot that I had my display performance at typical. And I was like, oh no, that looks really bad. And I noticed this in post-production. So I'm back refilming this section again. So fun fact, if you're in InDesign, make sure you're on high quality performance. That way you can see a closer representation of what you're going to have when it goes to production. I messed up. I typically keep it on the lower end just so I could work a little bit more quicker. It does bog your system down a little bit if you're not set up for the high intensity for the graphics too. It's also for the size too that you're working on. So if you see a difference in the graphic, it's because I went back and edited this video. We're going to export this for JPEG and we're going to take it over to Photoshop. So just go ahead and export this. We're going to rename this with the word test. Just for the video, hit enter. Quality is going to be maximum. This is cool. We can leave it like that. Our resolution is going to be 300, and then our color space could be CMYK. That's perfectly fine. You could change it over to RGB, but doesn't really matter because we're going to adjust it in Photoshop either way. Now we're just going to hit export. Now we're going to tab on over to Photoshop. Now I'm in Photoshop. I already had this file open up, and before we start working on this, I got to tell y'all that I got this Photoshop mockup from Adobe stock. They actually have Photoshop mockups there, and you can actually just download them. So if you have the whole creative suite and you're paying monthly for it, and you actually have the Adobe stock too, you can get these from them if you're not aware. If not, I actually can share you guys I can actually share some links for some free mockups that I've used in the past, and they're good too. But typically in these mockup files, you have a layer that's for your artwork. And that's just a smart object. So you just double click that smart object and it's going to open you up in a brand new Photoshop artboard. And this is where you're going to drop your artwork. Okay. Now we're going to tab on over to our file and then we're going to go ahead and grab our new one. It says test right here. Drop it right here. Double click. It looks kind of fine. Looks cool. But we want to size it up so to make sure that, it fits the can properly. You can see I go a little bit bigger than the artboard, just because I know I have that bleed. I'm going to go ahead and hit save. I'm going to bounce back over to my Photoshop file. Look, it looks great. But here's the thing about when you don't make your own mockups is that when you download other PSD mockups, you have to be at the mercies of whoever built them. And in this case, they did a really nice job, but this highlight is way too hard. I think this kind of washes out the design. So I'm just going to go ahead and take that from 80% opacity. I'm going to bring it down to like 40, 45. It's too like 40. My artwork itself doesn't look very vibrant. It looks kind of dull, like the color kind of got sucked out of it, right? So what we're going to do to fix that, we're going to go ahead and go to layers, go to layers adjustment, and we're going to go to the hue and saturation one, okay? Hue and saturation. Go ahead and click on it. This is cool. We leave it like that. Say okay. Now we're going to double click this right here. We're going to mess with the center one. We're just going to move it to the right, bump it up a little bit, and you can see it change. Probably like 15 to be good. And you can see the difference when you just click on the eyeball and off the eyeball, how it just shifts. And then you got your background color. You can change that to be whatever you want. And you want to do an orange or like a red orange. And that's really about it. Now you have a nice mock-up to show and present to stakeholders, potential clients. And it also just makes your artwork look that much more polished, that you could take your illustration and also incorporate it into a real world scenario and also a real product that could be used out there in the market. This actually just gives you that much more value as an illustrator that you could do this kind of work. So that's really about it for the video. I really got to say thank you again for all the support. If you made it to the end, thank you so much. I appreciate you guys watching to the end. And if you're not already, please subscribe the video, comment, share it. I'm not too sure if you guys know, but you can follow me on Instagram at No Effort Art. You can see all my artwork that I've done before. I have a Twitch at No Effort Art. So essentially, just type in No Effort Art and you'll find me on any other platform. But that's really it for the video. Thank you again. I'll see y'all. Bye.